So I have a very strong opinion on this Lamont Roach versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz fight. And I really think that Lamont Roach is a beneficiary of recency bias here from a lot of people, where he had a very good performance against Tank, but in my opinion, I really don't think Tank even trained for that fight. If Tank did train, he did not train anywhere near as hard as he needed to. There's no denying at all that Tank Davis is no longer mentally committed to his boxing career, especially in the way that he was in his prime, or whenever he was knocking people out. It's very cliche in boxing and in the boxing fandom, people after a fight ends going back to before the fight and saying, "Oh, I could tell by the walkout. I could tell by, the pre-fight footage that he was going to lose, that he was off that night." People said that about Eubank against Ben just a couple weeks ago when Eubank lost to Ben in the rematch, that he looked bad before the fight. And I remember looking at him in the walkout being like, I didn't see that. I didn't perceive that. He looked calm. He looked nonplussed. He looked like he'd been there before, but he has been there before. He has walked out to big stadium fights before. So it wasn't. I got no vibe that Eubank was going to lose just from the walkouts. But Tank versus Roach, oh, I got a vibe from Tank big time before that fight from the pre-fight footage that he was not going to win, that he had not shown up, that this was a fighter. I didn't even necessarily get the vibe of it was, oh, I'm undefeated, so I don't have to do the work. I didn't even get that vibe. I just got the vibe that he didn't care. I'm sorry. I got a completely detached. I really wish I weren't here right now from Tank Davis, right? To reference SpongeBob, to reference Squidward, right? The guy looked like he didn't train at all. I mean, his muscle definition, even for that fight, I saw it didn't look. He didn't look as muscular as Tank used to. He just didn't look as fit, even. All this to say, it's really hard for me to believe that Lamont Roach is a favorite here against Pitbull when he was clearly the beneficiary against Tank of the right matchup at the right time. For Tank, that's what made it so extraordinary, that for Tank, Lamont Roach was supposed to sort of have been cherry picking, right? It was a cherry picked matchup for Tank. Lamont Roach was a former sparring partner of his, a guy that he came up with, and it was supposed to be a guy that he could very easily dispatch of. And the match ended up making Lamont Roach look like some kind of tactical genius. Not that he isn't a very technical, high IQ boxer, but I don't think there's any denying that if you had the same Tank that you had against Davis Martin, I think Lamont Roach gets KO'd just like everybody else does, to be honest with you. We see in Tank chasing the Jake Paul fight and in his recent behavior and just in everything about the way that he's acted and carried himself in the last year or two, that he does not want to be involved in the sport anymore. He wants to make a big paycheck and never have to fight again. That is not at all the situation that Pitbull Cruz is in. Pitbull is a fighter in his prime. Pitbull is relevant. Not only is he relevant, he's dangerous stylistically in the same way that Tank Davis should have been dangerous towards Lamont Roach in their fight. Pitbull actually is dangerous in those ways. Not in the exact same ways, but in the same ways. He's a harder puncher. He's coming at you from a lower center of gravity. He's very aggressive. He's very forward moving. He can probably put Roach out, and Roach probably can't put him out. And again, it's crazy to me that Roach is a favorite here when that's true. When Roach is not going to knock out Pitbull. Pitbull could very well knock out Roach. And whereas Tank Davis is kind of down your throat, he'll hit you with crosses. He's got great finishing instincts, or at least he did back in the day, or at least he did in his prime. He had great finishing instincts. But Pitbull's got a little bit of the peekaboo style going on. He's down here, fucko kind of deal, like Hajime no Ippo. He's going to come at you from underneath from all sorts of different angles, big looping hooks, get in your chest and just whip you from right above his head, fist right above his head. 5'4", man. He's got to use his height disadvantage to his advantage. It's hard to even find sparring partners to get ready for a fighter like this for Lamont Roach. So I'm picking Pitbull Cruz in this fight. I don't necessarily think you're going to see him get exposed too much, maybe in the same way that people would say Brian Norman did against Devin Haney. I don't think this is a similar situation. But it's definitely a situation where Lamont Roach can enter this fight thinking that he can use the exact same skills and even some of the exact same strategies to beat Pitbull that he did to beat Tank, and that's not going to be true at all. Pitbull is both a lot more consistent with his offensive approach. He's not as tailored to a finish, and at the same time, he's also more unconventional and in a lot of ways harder to predict. So I'm picking Pitbull in this fight. I'll just go by UD, but I actually don't think it's going to be terribly close of a fight. I could definitely see Pitbull winning a 116, 112, a 115, maybe across the board 115, 113, maybe a majority decision. But I just think Pitbull can press Roach. I think that he can press Roach and he can keep pressing Roach because he can change up his looks. And that, whereas Tank was always chasing the knockout in their fight, Pitbull's not going to be chasing the knockout. He's just going to be pressure fighting. Just like he does every time out. That's his job. That's his style. And Lamont Roach had all those rounds coming up, literally sparring Tank Davis to prepare to beat Tank Davis. He doesn't have any rounds sparring anybody like Pitbull Cruz. So give me Pitbull Cruz in this fight. Like and subscribe for more boxing analysis. I'll be right back with Stephen Fulton versus Shaggy Foster. I have a very strong opinion on that fight as well and who's going to win that one.